Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Sunday, everybody. Normally we take Sundays off, but there was so much to cover from this week that we just had to do an extra episode today so that we're on top of the most salient developments as we move into a new week. I hope you're enjoying a restful weekend. Now, with that said, let's jump in. First up, this week saw the publication of a long report from US-based Bloomberg saying that in many parts of China, the warehouses and industrial parks that used to be a magnet for international investors are grappling with a surprising slowdown in business activity. The outlet argues that logistics hubs that were built in anticipation of a long-lasting boom in e-commerce, manufacturing, and food storage are losing tenants, forcing building owners to slash rents and shorten lease terms. Shares of real estate investment trusts that own Chinese commercial properties, quote, have plummeted, and some of their managers expect their rental income to fall further, end quote. Bloomberg points out, citing real estate consultancies, that average vacancy rates at logistics properties in East and North China are approaching 20%, the highest in years. More warehouses are being built, which is making the problem worse. Xavier Lee, an equity analyst at Morningstar who covers the real estate sector, for example, told the outlet, quote, "We're looking at a supply glut in logistics and industrial properties in China," end quote. Bloomberg's economists argue, quote, "The deterioration has been disappointing for property owners that were counting on an economic rebound in China this year. Global institutions have collectively invested more than $100 billion in warehouses, industrial buildings, office towers, and other Chinese commercial real estate over the past decade, according to data from MSCI Real Capital Analytics. The foreign investors include Blackstone Inc., Prudential Financial Inc., PGIM, Singapore's GIC, and CapitaLand Group, and many others," end quote. So, what happened? Well, the authors argue that China's commercial real estate sector was a bright spot through much of the country's housing downturn that began in 2021, but it is now feeling the effects of spending cutbacks by consumers and businesses alike. Quote, "The softening in the logistics and industrial sectors is happening alongside an office property slump that is playing out in major cities, including Beijing and Shanghai. Both slumps also partly the result of overbuilding that was powered by the large sums of money that poured into commercial real estate when interest rates, borrowing, and construction costs were low," end quote. It's also advanced that heightened geopolitical tensions are prompting companies to shift some of their manufacturing offshore to cater to end consumers that want to reduce their reliance on China. That and a slowdown in cross-border trade have also reduced businesses' need for storage facilities in mainland China. According to data from Cushman & Wakefield, the warehouse vacancy rate in East China, where many logistics properties are clustered, climbed to 19.2% in the first quarter. The overall vacancy rate nationwide was 16.5%, quote, "thanks in part to the better performing southern region," end quote. These rates are about triple the rates in the US, South Korea, Japan, and Australia. The outlet adds that of the 20 major Chinese cities tracked, 13 saw logistics rents drop quarter on quarter in Q1, led by the capital as well as Shenzhen, with falls of 4.2% and 3.9% respectively. Quote, "An additional 33 million square meters, the equivalent to around 4,600 soccer pitches, of new supply is scheduled for completion by the end of 2026 in the country," end quote. As we can see here, this is having an effect on REIT prices. Ing Kiet, Mapletree REIT CEO, expressed in an April earnings call, quote, "We're trying to get greater clarity on whether we are seeing the bottom, but I don't think we are seeing it now. We'll have to wait for a while," end quote. Hambert Peng, head of China at Gore Capital Partners, an investment firm that owns real estate assets, told Bloomberg, quote, "Everybody is cutting costs. I think most of the logistics space owners are having a tough time negotiating with the existing or new tenants," end quote. Next up, we need to have an update to this week's tensions across the Taiwan Strait. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, as always, it's a huge help if you can hit the like button. And for those who have not done so already, 42% of regular viewers are not subscribed. If we can get this below 40, that would be amazing. This is one of the best ways to help the channel grow, along with sharing And of course, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below for anyone who wants to help me keep the channel financially sustainable. Thank you so much, everybody. This week, the Taipei-based Mainland Affairs Council raised the travel alert for mainland China, Hong Kong and Macau to orange, effective immediately, advising citizens to avoid non-essential travel. Taipei officials cited the recent opinions on legally punishing Taiwan independence stubborn elements for crimes of splitting the country and inciting splitting the country announcement from Beijing as a key reason for the travel warning. We remember last week that the PRC Supreme People's Court and other institutions issued an authoritative legal opinion that threatens advocates of Taiwanese independence with criminal penalties up to the death penalty. In a statement on Friday, Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office angrily hit back at the move, saying that most Taiwanese can visit China with no need to worry and can come in high spirits, adding that the new legal guidelines were only aimed at, quote, a tiny number of separatists and their evil words and actions, end quote. The problem, however, is that William Lai Ching-te, has been labelled as a separatist by Beijing, so his supporters would be too by extension, and, well, he was just elected Taiwan's new president. So this isn't exactly a tiny number, as Beijing is saying. Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office said that Taipei, quote, has ignored the facts and is trying to intimidate its own people for political means, which we are strongly opposed to. The majority of Taiwanese compatriots can participate in cross-strait exchanges and cooperation. They don't have to have any worries about travelling to and from the mainland. They can absolutely travel in high spirits and depart well content, end quote. Meanwhile, this week, the Taiwan-based Liberty Times, sister newspaper of the Taipei Times, reports that 2 U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretaries of State quietly visited Taiwan Thursday last week, meeting with representatives from Taiwan's 12 allies, as well as representatives from nations without official ties, including Australia, Belgium, Canada, the Czech Republic, the EU, Finland, France, Japan, Luxembourg, New Zealand, Poland, and the UK. Quote, as far as I know, a meeting of 23 countries and the EU being held in Taipei with 2 top American State Department officials is unprecedented. The meeting was called to discuss how to increase Taiwan's international participation and boost collaboration with countries in the region. The report cites multiple sources as saying that the 2 officials were here to underscore the point that UN Resolution 2758 does not involve Taiwan, nor should it be conflated with China's One China principle. End quote. Meanwhile, the military pressure from the PRC has kept up too. According to the US-based Institute for the Study of War, PRC Taiwan update for this week, 1. The PRC has increased its violations of Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone since President Lai Ching-te's inauguration on May the 20th. 2. 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels entered restricted waters around Kinmen on the 25th of June. And 3. A likely state-sponsored PRC cyber threat actor is conducting persistent network infiltration operations against various Taiwanese organizations. Okay, and with this covered, I wanted to end today's video with one more Taiwan development. Tomorrow, Monday, the 1st of July, we'll see the release of a new short book called The Boiling Moat, published by the US-based Hoover Institution and edited by Matt Pottinger, former Deputy National Security Advisor of the United States and China Czar under President Donald Trump. The contributors to the book believe that Taiwan could spark a major war, possibly even a nuclear one, pitting the US and its Asian allies against China. According to their estimates, more than 10,000 Americans could be killed in action in just 3 weeks of combat. I will join many in reading the book once it's out tomorrow, but I wanted to end today's video by examining a pre-release book review by Ian Buruma of the New Yorker called How to Start a War Over Taiwan. Of course, we note that Pottinger is a figure from the right in the US political environment, and the New Yorker is generally considered an outlet from the left, so this political tension is evident throughout the article. We also note that Mr. Buruma also references Salman Wasif Khan's recently published and excellent book, The Struggle for Taiwan, A History of America, China, and the Island Caught Between. Indeed, these 2 books, one from Pottinger, one from Khan, take different views on what US policy towards Taiwan should be, and great value could be gained in reading them together. With all this said, we now quote selected excerpts from Mr. Buruma's New Yorker article directly. If a Chinese attempt to take Taiwan by force were to succeed, the consequences could be dire. East Asian countries, panicked by China's control over their supply routes in the East China Sea and by America's unwillingness or incapacity to protect them, might embark on a nuclear arms race. Taiwan's semiconductor industry, which provides the world with more than half of its chips, would fall into Chinese hands. And because Taiwan is also the only functioning liberal democracy in the Chinese-speaking world, Singapore is an illiberal democracy, crushing Taiwan's system of government would be a huge blow to Democrats, greater even than the crackdown in Hong Kong. Pottinger and his contributors think that the only way to stop China from launching an attack on Taiwan and possibly starting a devastating war is to build such a formidable system of military deterrence that China wouldn't dare. Their book is a kind of PowerPoint briefing on how to turn the Taiwan Strait into a boiling moat filled with JASSMs, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, LRASMS, Long-Range Anti-Ship Missiles, HIMARS, High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, PJDAMS, Powered Joint Direct Attack Munitions, uncrewed sea drones, and much other military hardware and software. Readers will need a taste for dense military prose. Missiles, drones, and bombers are, however, insufficient to deter China, according to the book's authors. Taiwan and Japan must be given a new military culture. Grant Newsom, an ex-Marine who served as the Marine Corps attaché in Tokyo, thinks that the Japanese people must be prepared physically and psychologically for a war over Taiwan. One can agree that Taiwan deserves to be defended against military aggression, but what is missing in all this talk of missiles, drones, and the fighting spirit is any sense of politics or history. Reference to the past in The Boiling Moat are only of the crudest kind. History, of course, is never uncomplicated. A concern for democracy and freedom was not always the reason for defending Taiwan. The question is, in fact, fraught with bad history, which muddles our understanding of what is at stake in East Asia. As Salman Wasif Khan observes in his rich and thoughtful book, The Struggle for Taiwan, a historian watching the situation from afar could not help being struck by the odd mix of mendacity, amnesia, and half-truths on display. Start with China's claim that Taiwan was always part of China, a cornerstone of Xi's nationalism. In fact, for most of its history, Taiwan, or Formosa, as it was once called, was no more a part of the Chinese nation than, say, Gibraltar was a part of Britain. Until the 17th century, when the Dutch ruled the island as a colony, hardly any Chinese people lived there. The original inhabitants, whose descendants now make up a small minority in Taiwan, were Austronesian tribes who ruled themselves in a number of chieftains. Then the Dutch brought in tens of thousands of people from China to till the land. In 1662, the Dutch were ousted by a half-Japanese, half-Chinese swashbuckler. He was a loyalist to the deposed Ming dynasty. He hoped to stage a rebellion from Taiwan against the Qing rulers, who were not Chinese but Manchus. He briefly established an independent kingdom on the island, but it was overthrown by the Manchus in 1683. Taiwan then became part of the Qing Empire. After the Qing lost a war with Japan in 1895, Taiwan became a Japanese colony. To demonstrate to the Western nations that Japan could also be a great imperial power, the Japanese presented Taiwan as a model colony, more modern, more industrialized, more technologically advanced than any part of the Qing Empire. From Washington's perspective, Taiwanese democracy became something of an irritant. Chiang Kai-shek, though headstrong and manipulative, had been easier to deal with than were democratically elected politicians, whose flirtation with the idea of independence provoked belligerent Chinese reaction and complicated U.S.-China relations. Washington felt that it had to both defend democratic Taiwan and to reassure Beijing that Taiwanese independence would continue to be resisted. A frustrated President Clinton once exclaimed, "I hate our China policy. I wish I was running against our China policy." Once again, Taiwan has become a pawn in a clash between great powers. The stakes are higher than ever, but to keep East Asia safe from a terrible war is not just a military problem. Khan is surely right to question how getting tough will alter China's conduct. A show of force is supposed to deter China from aggression. But what if deterrence fails, Khan writes. Being deterred, after all, was a choice. China could choose not to be. What if the show of force backed China into a corner from which it felt it had no option but to lash out? he added. Avoiding a violent conflict will take a great deal of diplomatic finesse, guided by a profound knowledge of local history and politics. This makes one wonder whom Pottinger is trying to convince. Is his main intended audience Taiwanese, Japanese, or American? If America's old Taiwan policies were often muddled, Trump's attitudes are so fickle that one can't predict what he will do. Depending on his mood, as Khan writes, he might have been as willing to provide Taiwan with nuclear weapons as to sell it to China for a trade deal, he added. With a president like that in charge, no amount of JASSMS and HIMARS is likely to keep East Asia, or indeed the rest of the world, safe. Here ends the direct quote. So this is quite a critical review of the book. Nevertheless, The Boiling Moat is released tomorrow, and will likely be well worth a read. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Sunday, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you for a new week tomorrow.